that celebrates us.
Y'all showing out today.
From jazz to neo soul, blues.
Now this is what I'm talking about.
Hip hop.
Ah, that's my jam.
Gospel. R&B.
This is how we do.
We truly are your community station on the campus of Texas Southern University, serving your entire family, our entire community. The Choice. 90.9 KTSU Houston. The views and opinions expressed on Real World, Real Talk do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the management and staff at KTSU FM, nor Texas Southern University Administration and the Board of Regents. Welcome to Real World, Real Talk, the show that represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. For Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
What's going on, Houston? Welcome to a live edition of Real World, Real Talk. This is our voter, I don't want to say activation. Maybe I should say agitation. Yeah, because we're trying to get you ready to vote. We want to get you prepared. We want to get you motivated to get out and make your voice heard by making your vote count. You're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more. KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial, and KTSU. Give a shout out to those who participated in the first annual Community Fall Festival on today from 12 noon to 4 p.m. Free food was out there, park rides, STEM activities, music, and more. This event was free. I hope that you got a chance to take advantage of that and you were blessed for being part of that. Join KTSU on Sunday, November the 5th, for our gospel jazz brunch sponsored by Civic Heart Community Services at the historic legendary El Dorado Ballroom. Doors open at 11:30 a.m., featuring performances by the one and only George Powell, hosted by V. Michael McKay and Nzinga Rito. Boom Boom Williams will be your DJ. Food provided by Lucille's. Seating is limited. Tickets are available online at ktsuradio.com or text the word brunch to the number 713-313-4354. That's text the word brunch, BRUNCH, to the number 713-313-4354. Get your tickets and get your tickets today. Early voting is happening right now through November the 3rd, and that's what we're going to talk about on today. You must be a registered voter to cast your ballot. You can early vote right here on the campus of Texas Southern University in the heart of 3rd Ward on Cleburne Street in the old daycare building right next to the Sawyer Auditorium parking lot. You'll see a bunch of signs out there encouraging you to vote for specific candidates. Election day is November the 7th. More details on voting can be found online at harrisvotes.com. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram, IG, at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, at DZ Cofield. There's a special free luncheon that's coming up on Saturday, November the 4th, from 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m., and it's going to be held at the Fountain Life Center on the southwest side of town. Now, the reason I'm telling you about this is because this luncheon is free and it's honoring veterans. Now, that's important enough. I'm out because I want to get Brother Cornelius Blackshear there. There's been major changes in the rating system and how people can get benefits who have served in the armed services. And let me give you just an example. Brother Skip is a member of the Good Hope Church, and I talked to Brother Skip on yesterday. He was out for our Hype Fest, Healing Your Person. We were trying to help people find healing for themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and it was a great event. And Brother Skip was there, and I was asking him what his rating was. He served 33 years in the Army, was a sergeant, and his rating is 12%. Now, to maximize your benefits, you have to get a higher rating than 12%. And he did not know that the changes in the law that took place in January, and I did a show on this earlier. We're going to do another follow-up show for Veterans Day. But he did not know how many benefits were available now that were not available previously, and nobody called him. Cornelius is an advocate for veterans to help veterans connect with the services that are available. And I'm trying to make sure that we get Cornelius Blackshear there so that we can make sure we help our veterans get the services that they have earned. These are not services that are given. These are services that have been earned because of their service to our country. These benefits are also available to those who are widows, who are survivors, who are the children of veterans, who have given their life to this country. They were killed in battle or not. As we know, many servicemen and servicewomen came back with diseases that they contracted on the battlefield. And these services, many Vietnam veterans and Korean War veterans, many of the new veterans now are not having to fight those battles because they recognize that those old soldiers suffered so that the newer soldiers couldn't benefit from what they did. But now they're going back and trying to make things right. So if you know a veteran who has served this country and has served this country honorably, this Veterans Luncheon is going on, and we're going to make sure that we pass on Brother Cornelius Blackshear's information. I gave him a call on yesterday. He came by the church, registered 2 people that I think represent so many people who are out there. Brother Skip was one who was totally unaware that he even had to file to get his benefits and was not given a thank you, a flag, or anything after 33 years of service to our country. And then we had Sister Pearlie, whose husband was a medic and died because of diseases contracted from his battlefield services, and he never got the benefits that he needed to get. It wasn't that he wasn't admitted into the VA, but there were financial benefits, and some of those benefits can be paid retroactively. You heard me right, retroactively. And so I want to just share that news and spread that word. On November the 19th, KTSU is a sponsor of Live Jazz on the Seawall. Leo Tizer, Nelson Rangel, Chieli Minucci, Anthony Crawford, Nicole Henry, Joel Rosenblatt, and so many more will be coming on November the 19th, Jazz on the Seawall at 3 p.m. at the Galveston Island Convention Center at the San Luis Resort. Listen, it's a great drive down there. It's easy parking, and it's easy to get to, and you will have a great time. Go to Eventbrite and get tickets. This is a live jazz concert that is sponsored in part KTSU. And then you don't want to forget on August the 26th, that's a Saturday at the Brown Theater inside the Wortham Center, Dave Kaz and Friends, Summer Horns 2023, featuring Eric Darius, Candy Dulfer, Mesa Leak. Listen, call Ticketmaster and get your tickets today. These are events sponsored by KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. We are your jazz station, and so much more. I'm so happy to have with me a brother that I've had a chance to share the microphone with over some time. I've kind of been his radio mentor, and that's none other than Minister Chris Johnson from Impact Houston Live. And so we're coming together today to emphasize the importance of getting out to vote. We had a voter drive today, Souls to the Polls, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. And then we've got some special guests in the big studio today to talk about what it means to move past voter apathy and to get to voter activation. And I'm going to let him introduce our guests on today. Chris Johnson, what's going on, brother? Hold on, because you're not coming through. Let's see. Let's make sure we got this situated straight.
Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Great. Okay, well, wouldn't have been a show without that, right? Hey, Pastor, it's great to be back in here with you, as always, and thank you so much for just opening up and sharing the Real World, Real Talk platform. As you said earlier, I absolutely do come out of that DNA pool, that Cofield DNA pool when it comes to things that impact not only our community but our world, but especially when we view those things through a biblical lens. I am really joined in the studio this evening by our guest. I'm just going to introduce them by name only because I want to go ahead and get into our conversation. But we're joined this evening first by our Harris County Clerk, Tanisha Hudspeth. And I want to thank her for coming on.
Good evening. Good to be here again.
Absolutely. We're also joined by the Rev Lisa Hunt from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. And thank you so much for being here with us as well.
It's my total pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're also joined by Attorney Charles Cohen. Attorney Cohen, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, brother. Pleased to be here.
Yeah. So, the landscape of the 2020 general election, as you all know, was dotted with efforts by the black church, but really all churches, to encourage voter registration, mobilization, and protect against efforts to suppress the vote. Normally, these are done under various slogans like Souls to the Polls or AME Voter Alert or Kojic Counts. Typically, it's your black denominations and national bodies have partnered with civil rights organizations to try to increase voter turnout, not only in the African American community, but communities in large. And so today was, I think, the culmination of those efforts in Hope to Vote. We were joined by several churches and denominations from across the community and had an opportunity to engage in early voting. And before we talk about that, I really want to talk with or hear from Harris County Clerk Tanisha Hudspeth in terms of what early numbers are looking like and some of those negative talking points that people used to frame the Democrat in Harris County, and just some other things that have been done to address that.
Yes, so we are in day 7 of early voting. Early voting ends November the 3rd, so don't fear. You have a whole nother week to get it done, right? Out of 2.55 million registered voters in Harris County, that's 2.55 million registered voters. I say only because it's a lot more voters to go. 91,000 thus far. We still have about an hour left on this Sunday. 91,000 in the first week have decided to come out and vote early.
Wow.
I say only because, again, when you measure 2.55 million to the amount of people turnout, but quite naturally, comparing this to 2015, which was another open mayoral seat election, we are over the 50% mark. So what we're seeing is more people are deciding to vote early, having a plan, getting it done, because, anything can happen between that time frame and election day. So my encouragement, this was the last weekend of early voting, but you have all the rest of this week till Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And over the last decade, voting has expanded in many different ways. One of them is Harris County adopted a county-wide polling place program where you can not just vote anywhere on early voting, but you can vote anywhere on election day. And so there's always one thing I always know for sure, there's always going to be misinformation campaigns. And that's why I love to get to come talk to our listeners about how important it is to get the right information. Right information pools are our main website for all things in relating to the election process. But also, you want to dig a little bit deeper, right? You can go to Harris Votes and get your specific ballot so you can see what to vote on. But the League of Women Voters is the best resource in looking at all the measures, all the candidates. It's nonpartisan, and you really should go to LWV Houston to do your research on the actual candidates, because my office can't do that piece. But it is a lot on the ballot. There are 14 state constitutional amendments. That means if you live in the state of Texas, you'll see that on your ballot. What's important? Tax taxes, homestead, the power grid, the state constitutional amendments, once it is voted and decided, we basically have those until the end of time, until someone comes and amends those. A Harris County-wide hospital district bond, putting more money into the hospital system here, I think that's very important, right? Including an open mayoral seat, right? We're getting ready to elect a new mayor after 8 years of service from our previous mayor or current mayor, council members in districts and council members at large. And most important, there are many school districts have either trustees running for office and or bonds on there. And anytime you hear the word bond, you should also be thinking about money, right? And that means your money, taxpayers' dollars. So that's kind of a scope and view of what's on the ballot. And again, we have plenty of time to study that, to look into that. Look, if you go to Harris Votes, put your name into the tab and your address, you can see your sample ballot. You can print that out, mark it up, and you can physically take it into the ballot box with you, because as we know, those amendments are not so easy, right, to remember what for and against is. So those are the two greatest resources. Again, so far, over 91,000 people have voted. What's really important about this election is knowing where you live and where you're registered. Everyone will see the commercials and the PSAs and the things of that nature. And in order to vote for the mayor and city council members, you have to live within the city of Houston limits and boundaries. So you might have a Houston address, but you don't live in the city of Houston. So why am I telling you to go to Harris Votes? So that you can double check your voter registration, your sample ballot, exactly what you're going to see, because there's nothing more discouraging than a voter coming in thinking they're going to see a platform or a candidate and it's not there. Again, everybody will see the state constitutional amendments, the hospital bond, but again, for council members in different areas of Harris County, make sure you know where you live and where you're registered. And the city of Houston has redistricted later, so you might have been in one district, but now you're in another. So be informed. Go to harrisvotes.com for everything in relation to this election, but take someone with you. Make a plan. Souls to the are much larger on this Sunday than they have typically been in the past. So sure. That means it's working, right? And so rallying around our church groups, our community groups, you know, the colleges, whatever your thing is, right? We don't care who you vote for. We just want you to go vote. Yeah. Go vote.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see the constant flow of people coming into the polls. One of the things that I thought was really cool was the curbside voting.
Absolutely.
Just talk a little bit about that, because, when I think about curbside, right. And so the curbside, I mean, that was really cool because you had, you have community members, some who may have some mobility challenges, sure. ADA challenges.
Yes.
And they don't have to get out the car.
Yeah. So the good thing about curbside voting, that is definitely for our more challenged voters that might have some sort of disability or have a problem standing for long periods of time. So there's many options. Curbside voting is offered at any voting center. It is not just at certain locations in certain communities. By law, we offer curbside voting. And if you go here to TSU, it's literally right in front of the building. Our office doesn't go and investigate. You come up, we trust that you're a voter that needs to vote by curbside. We qualify you just like any other person. Most of our elderly individuals choose that method, which works well. You know, a couple of years ago, we were really on to something here in Harris County where we had drive-through voting, and that was for everyone. But of course, the state turned back the hands of time on that, and curbside has never stopped. But the thought to basically curbside for everybody was, a way that we were able to handle the pandemic in 2020 in ways that it didn't impact voters. So again, those that are elderly or have some more mobility or just, you're offered to vote curbside. No one's going to interrogate you on that deal. However, if you have some mobility concerns, you can still go into the poll and vote. We have a specific machine for those who might be hearing impaired or visually impaired or in a wheelchair, where you can still get the actionable inside the poll, and the election worker can help you in that way. So I think this is great information, especially in our communities where we have, if I just want to give you the raw numbers, majority, over half of the people inside this city of Houston election are 50 and above.
Wow.
Yep. And then 20% of those folks are 65 and above. And we're seeing a little bit of a decline in mail ballot voters. I believe these folks are getting out. They're either curbside or they're coming to a poll. So think about that. Half of the individuals that will decide this election are 50 and above. And then 20% of those folks are 65 and above. Now, someone might ask or figure why that age group, but there is something about that age group that not too long ago knew what it was like to ability that we have today. And so I don't know how we're missing our younger demographic or how that's not polling down, but there should be more conversation as we approach more elections in the future of how do we get our young people activated. One of those ways, we put a voting location on a college campus, right? And we're doing that all across the county, but we really have to figure out how we're meeting our 18 to 24-year-old voters, our 24 and above, and bringing them into the space to understand, hey, you're literally getting ready to elect the new mayor for the next 4 years.
You know, it's amazing, County Clerk, and I'd like for you to talk about some of the percentages. There's a person in office right now who was elected by 8 votes. And
that's right.
Those 8 votes, you could literally look down the pew of a church and count 8 people. 8 votes is what got that person in. When we talk about percentages, what have been the average percentages of registered voters who have been voting? Because we have fought to get people registered, but there seems to be this disconnect.
Yes, there's a
between
drop-off. Getting
people registered and them actually being activated to vote. What have been the percentages?
That's a really good question. As we mentioned earlier, we're growing every day. We're a little bit close to 5 million individuals that just live here. And then when you get down to register, we're talking about 2.55 million. Every election cycle is very different. When you get to a municipal election, more local, for whatever reason, it's a huge drop off compared to a presidential year. So our prediction just for this election alone, out of that 2.55 registered, we're looking at maybe 30% of the demographic for this election. So we're talking about, let's see, if we're at 91,000 now, I'm kind of, they can see me looking in my head now trying to find the numbers. If you're talking about 91,000, let's say we vote another 100 to 200,000 between now. I predict we're going to vote at least 300,000 by the end of early voting. And then maybe another 200,000 when you get to election day. Elections really depend on who is on the platform. Sometimes I have to keep it as straight and real as sometimes it's how sexy is the candidate, right? And I don't mean by sexy and physical form. And maybe it could be that too, but what I mean by what kind of candidate are they? How are they reaching the voters? What are they talking about? Is it relational? Are they reaching the hearts and minds of voters? And oftentimes it is who is running and what their platform is. Oftentimes it really is what measure is it, right? And how loud and sound is that? And so, I'm kind of giving you, okay, I'm predicting 500 to 700,000 of that possible 2.55 million. I hope they surprise me, which is why I'm going to every single platform that will invite me to talk about to it. And then when we get to a presidential year, if I say, hey, we have 3 million next year, we'll see at least half of that 3 million show up in a presidential year. But it's growing, and early voting is growing substantially. People are getting the hang of it. They know what location they like to go to. But Pastor, I'm really glad that you asked that question in terms of registered and possible turnout, because what I know now is that as we talk about this, we have a lot more voters to vote between now and election day.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, when you say your vote doesn't count, if you don't vote.
That's right. And
if people decided, just people in specific communities, it doesn't matter what community, if you said, you move from 20% to 40% or 40% to 60%, your vote is empowered when more people vote. But when your vote is held on the side.
That's right.
Then you're literally rendering your own community and your own household impotent in a very real way.
You brought up a really good point that there was a race decided by 8 votes. So I love to challenge individuals on my this very well that can determine whether we go into a runoff or not by literally maybe 8 to 20 votes. So we'll get to see the trends. We'll get to talk about that. But I have seen in every single election that I've been involved in where some races, I mean, this past November, literally hundreds of ballots. And you can put 100 people in this studio, well, close to 100, inside of KTSU, and that can be the demographic that chooses that race. So I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, our vote is only as strong as we make it. If you don't vote, then you're allowing the other thousands of people to make those decisions for you. It's just plain and simple. It's very plain and simple. You're allowing others to make the decision for you. So harrisvotes.com is where you want to go. We're on all social media platforms from Instagram to Facebook to Twitter X or whatever it might be called, TikTok. We're everywhere. Or you can call Election Hotline, which is 713-755-6965, 713-755-6965.
Reverend Lisa Hunt, what really at early voting centers, I think across the city, was a response from faith communities across this city. Talk about why it's important for churches and faith-based organizations to be involved in the democratic process.
I think that communities show their values by how they vote and the people they vote for. I think one of the things that's true about Houston is power is deeply centralized politically in our city. So the mayor makes all the decisions about what gets on the floor, whether it's affordable housing or drainage or criminal justice and how that's meted out in our city. The relationship of the city to the school district. We have no elected representatives in our schools right now. So who we're voting for matters, and their values and what they think is important shapes our lives. So how we vote and that we vote is entrusting our values into the people that are representing us. And if we're sitting on the edges, other people's values to shape our own lives. And I think given the pluralism of Houston, we are certainly not mostly over 65 in this city.
That's right. That's right. I hadn't looked at the numbers. I am going to give some numbers this week on how much of that is not, is the demographic in terms of that 18, 20, 30 to 40 that could literally impact this election and make the decisions for this election.
And there are critical issues on the ballot. One of the issues that you didn't raise was the impact on colleges and universities.
That's right.
And who's getting state money. The issue of rolling that back on property taxes, and that starves cities and schools and equity, healthcare and Medicaid expansion at the state level. So some of those constitutional amendments are critical, and to amend the Texas Constitution is really nearly impossible.
That's right.
So showing up and being counted is so critical, and is an act of faith, because we're really entrusting our values to the people that are leading us.
Now, I believe we're joined by Dr. Ann Benefield. Dr. Benefield.
Yes.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for calling in. As you joined the conversation, Reverend Lisa Hunt brought up, I think, some really great issues that are on the ballot in terms of the constitutional amendments and some other things. Can you kind of talk about what's on the ballot and just help educate and raise our awareness around some of the more pivotal issues that voters are going to have to choose about or decide?
On the ballot this fall, there are 14 state propositions. Voters need to go to lwvhouston.org or vote 411 to see the pros and cons associated with each of those ballot initiatives, because everything that reads simple and sounds really good may not actually be that great. So make sure you do your due diligence by reading the pros and cons. There are 2 local city charter proposed measures, one dealing with the 3 or more city councils being able to put an item on the agenda to be voted on for city council meetings, and that would alter the city charter, which provides a strong mayor-council form of government. Right now, the mayor is in control of the agenda for the city council. The other issue has to deal with whether or not the city of Houston should consider amending its charter, that if they cannot get proportional representation on any area council or board, then they consider withdrawing from that particular board. I would just say, I'm not telling people how to vote, but if you're not at the table, then be on the menu. So read closely and carefully that particular proposal. The Harris County bond issue is critical. We know we're on the rise coming out of COVID. It's $2.5 billion trying to expand the LBJ system as well as being top as public hospitals and critical care centers and establishing clinics around Harris County. So voters need to be aware of that. There are 18 mayoral candidates who are running for mayor. So your due diligence and national candidates. There are 5 at-large city council positions, and you have a variety of candidates running for those positions, plus candidates running for the other. There are 16 city council positions, 5 of them at large, 11 are single-member districts. So I'm sure Tanisha has already stated that you need to go to harrisvote.com to find out what's on your ballot. So please do that. Print out a ballot so you will know a ballot. Because you take a paper printed out copy, you cannot take an electronic device into a polling location. So let's be educated voters. One of the things that has already happened over the last 6 days of early voting, of the 93,000 people who have voted, at this point, 60% are 65 years old and older. And they only, 65 plus population only makes the registered voters in the city of Houston and in Harris County. And that's kind of unfortunate because young people don't seem to be weighing in and having their voice heard in terms of who they think should lead the city into the future.
You're right on the money, Dr. Benefield. I literally just gave them the 20% of 65 and above. And I was talking to my husband on the way home, and he's like, why do you think this demographic is not interested? And I was like, I don't know. I ask people, I talk to them when I meet them places, what do you believe what would take, this demographic to start doing it? I'll tell you, our office is trying hard to get young folks in high schools engaged because they're going to be newly registered voters or at least eligible to do so. And a lot of people don't know this, but we hire high school techs. They only have to be 16 years of age. They're paid to work on election day. And what better to educate someone than to just tell them to go vote, right? Have them come work the process and learn for yourself on how it works. And so I do believe there are ways in county government we can do more civic engaged programs in the schools that take it to them, but I think we need to have more dialogue on what are we missing in these age groups that are not showing up, that are such influential numbers here in our great city.
Attorney Cohen, the People's Legal has been very strategic about targeting that 18 to 24, 18 to 40, 45 age group. Talk about some of the feedback that you get back when you're conversing with that demographic about their voter apathy.
Yeah, so and actually I'm also an adjunct professor here. And so this last week we had a conversation. So it's an ethics class, but at least twice a year I talk to them about getting out to vote and the importance of voting. And one of the young ladies in the class asked me, she said, well, why should we get out to vote when our vote doesn't really count? And she brought up the Electoral College. And so she said, if you take Texas, for example, every year is basically going to be a red state or a Republican state. So if you're a Democrat, your vote really doesn't count towards the Electoral College. So I had to explain to her, well, first of all, it's only in presidential elections. When you look at the local elections and the importance of getting out to vote, and someone mentioned the school board elections, the mayoral, the council elections, and the impact that has on them in particular. But I also brought up to them in terms of the decisions that are made as far as If you look at the forgiveness of student loans, now that's a federal. I was explaining to them based upon who you vote for. That's an issue-specific thing that can directly impact them as students.
Sure.
And so they immediately understood that aspect of things. I think the other challenge is where they get their information from.
Absolutely.
We all get our information.
Yes, for sure.
But they're getting it obviously from social media, which plays a huge role in trying to impact either to get them out to vote. And so from our perspective, the 18 to 35, 18 to 45 group, we've been working with some other organizations to ensure to push to get them out to vote. I can remember when I was in high school, I grew up in Illinois, county clerk's office would actually come to the schools and register us to vote. Now, I don't know if that would be legal here in Texas.
Yeah, we do it here.
Okay.
Well, it's the tax office now. It's voter registration, but we still do that where we'll come into the schools, we'll register. They normally bring in or those that are going to be registered soon, and then we also say, hey, well, go ahead and apply to work. But we still do that, and most schools in the state of Texas are required to be volunteer deputies to register students and to make it available. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are doing it, but by Texas law, it is a requirement.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and we will come back, and then we're going to pick up the conversation talking about some of those efforts that are happening in high school, and then we're going to talk about apathy in not only these collegiate spaces, but also in faith-based spaces as well, and some things we can do to combat that.
Order is the Harris County Clerk's Office Elections Department. Harris County voters find the latest news and information about voting. HarrisVotes.com is the official website and trusted source for voter information. Voters can find their polling locations and details about mail-in ballots. Early voting starts October 23rd through November 3rd. Election Day is November 7th. Details at harrisvotes.com.
Join KTSU for our Gospel November 5th. This event is held every first Sunday at the legendary El Dorado Ballroom, 2310 Elgin Street. Doors open at 11:30 a.m. Music provided by Boom Boom Williams. Show begins at 1 p.m. featuring George Powell.
Great is the Lord, and greatly to be
Hosted by Nzingarito and V. Michael McKay. Brunch provided by Lucille's of Houston. If you're a KTSU member, you get a special discounted rate. Promo code is KTSU. More information is available on our website, KTSUradio.com. From The Choice, 90.9 KTSU, your community station. We are your member-supported radio station. The Choice, 90.9 KTSU, your community station.
What's up, Houston? Chili Bill Smith. I hope you're enjoying all of this great Sunday gospel and inspirational music here on The Choice 90.9 KTSU. Reminding you to join me tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. with Chili Bill Smith and friends. I'll be waking you up with all of your great smooth jazz, R&B, and inspirational music, along with weather, traffic, the question of the day at 7:05, entertainment news, and much more. So join me tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. for Morning Vibes with Chili Bill Smith and friends. Only on your community station, 90.9 KTSU.
KTSU and ALW Entertainment presents Live Jazz on the Seawall with the Jazz Fusion All-Stars, Nelson Rangel, Nuche, Lyle Tizer, Anthony Crawford, and Joel Rosenblatt with special guest Nicole Henry. Sunday, November 19th at the Galveston Convention Island Center at the San Luis Resort. Showtime 8 p.m. This is a show you don't want to miss. More info at eventbrite.com or ktsuradio.com.
Tiger family. Get ready for an incredible one-hour show filled with information about your university. Texas Southern University Tiger Thursday. Hosted by Tracy Clement, Connie Cochran, and Donna Franklin. Every Thursday from noon to 1 p.m., find out what's new, student initiatives, groundbreaking research, and information from the various colleges right here on campus. It's Tiger Thursday, every Thursday afternoon, only on The Choice 90.9 KTSU, your community station.
Hey, what's up? This is Kenny the Jet Smith. Good music, positive messages. Everything you need is here on The Choice 90.9 KTSU, your community station.
Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. Real Talk with your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. Dr. Annie Benefield, president of the League of Women Voters Houston, give us some encouraging words to help motivate all of us to get out and make our voice, our vote count.
As the former president of the League of Women Voters, I want to advise everyone that voting is a fundamental democratic obligation of each citizen to weigh in and have their voice heard. As I often state, that democracy is not a spectator sport where you sit into the arena and watch this event unfold, but it's a gladiator sport where we have to get in and fight for the things that we want, such as equal rights, justice, and voting rights. And this is so many people in the history of people in communities of color died, protested for years and years and years to give us the opportunity to be at the ballot box. And so we will be disrespecting their history and that heritage if we do not go out and have our voices heard in this very important arena.
Dr. Benefield, go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you for joining us on the night. I know you appreciate you calling in and being on with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Early voting is happening right now through November the 3rd. You must be a registered voter to cast your ballot. You can early vote right here on the campus of Texas Southern University on Cleburne Street in the old daycare building right next to the Sawyer Auditorium parking lot. Election day is November the 7th. More details on voting can be found online at harrisvotes.com. That's harrisvotes.com.
Attorney Cohen, before we went to break, we were a few different issues. Where our young people get their information from. But before we went to break, we were talking about the importance of faith-based organizations, churches, mosques, synagogues, the like, to be involved in the democratic process. I posed that question to you first, and then Reverend Lisa, and I'd love to get Dr. Cofield involved in this as well, because there is that faith-based organizations, specifically churches, we sit idly by and are not involved in the process. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, yeah, and one of the things that we've worked on with the People's Legal Clinic is to, in essence, engage our efforts with voter engagement with churches and other faith-based organizations. If you look throughout the history of, as I say, struggle in our communities coming out of enslavement in this country with the abolitionist movement, out of the spiritual community, the civil rights movement of the 1960s with Dr. King and Southern Christian Leadership Conference, those were the basis of the Voters' Rights Act, which brought equality of the ballot to black folks who could in certain states in the South. As Dr. Benefield talked about, there were people who fought, there were people who lost their lives over that right, so they didn't take it for granted. And so I think as regards the church today is very important, and the church, who I believe in other faith-based organizations, especially here in Houston that we've seen, who make it a priority that not only we engage people on voter importance, but also the education of the voter, the galvanization, and then holding those in office accountable. And so I think as we move forward, the impact that churches can have, the impact that all of these faith-based organizations can have on those issues has come back. And I think that's something that we've seen as part of the effort to get people out to vote in the various elections.
Reverend Lisa, what say you?
I think one of the other things that's really important in this conversation is the rise of white nationalism and Christian nationalists who are organizing people to vote and are guiding the gerrymandering that's happening in the country too. And I think that that's about white supremacy and trying to people of color from exercising the franchise. I also think that young people become disillusioned with institutions of all stripes, and they don't see their self-interest being reflected on ballots. Many of them don't own property, so property taxes are not speaking to them with institutions of all stripes. They see disinvestment in public colleges and universities where the burden of funding is falling on them and their parents rather than the state. And so I think that the challenge of saying, voting, electoral congregants refer to it, may not matter. And it's hard as a Christian minister to say, yes, it does, and you really need to be engaged, because if you're not, somebody else is. And that may not be reflecting the kind of world, the kind of kingdom that we want to see replicated in our democracy. The other thing that I think is on the rise is the theocracy of raising religious values of any stripe within the political sphere.
Correct.
And if we don't have a pluralistic electorate, then the value is diminished. And I think that's a critical issue these days.
Yeah.
I would say Reverend Lisa Hunt just dropped the mic on all of us.
Absolutely.
She touched on some very important points of where our country is going. And while there is, this sense that voter apathy, but people are not involved in the process, some people literally fear being a part of the process. So you just said a whole lot in one speech. And the bottom line is we have to self-reflect of what we are doing in our homes. And no longer can we have this sense. I'm so glad, to see particularly the black churches saying, okay, before there was a history of we don't talk politics in the church house, right? But now the churches are getting used to we have no choice in the matter, right? Which was so many years ago a standard. And so those topics are at the cusp of what we're dealing with in our nation. And either we talk about it and we also demonstrate it, or we continue going in the wrong direction.
I would say not even just in our nation, but here in Houston.
That's right.
Legislation that was protecting LGBTQ folks in the Houston area was defeated by certain Christian groups that got organized and moved on it.
Sure.
And so that can have deep impact on people's civil rights.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because this whole idea of our society attempting to shift back to a theocracy, I think, is very selective, right? And how we are moving. For many white evangelicals, there are only two sins in the Bible, homosexuality and abortion. And when you move past those issues, everything else is political and we shouldn't talk about it.
Word.
And, I've had a number of white evangelical friends who, on the cusp of the murder of George Floyd, when they made the statement in their pulpits that the murder of George Floyd was a tragedy and it was wrong, they literally saw millions of dollars out of their budget walk out of their congregations because they had members who stated, now you're getting too political. And one of the statements that was made by one of these pastors, I asked them what was the common thread behind all of these statements and what was said and how did they feel about it. And they made the statement that they were saddened to learn that many of their members had been discipled not by them, but by Fox News.
Wow.
And we've, come to this place where, when we talking about basic rights that everybody deserves and everybody should have, regardless of the lifestyles that they choose, regardless of the lifestyles that are chosen for them, right? That people have a right to certain inalienable rights. And we still have people in this country who do not view, for example, people of color, and specifically African American people, as full human beings, entitled to all of those rights and entitled to all of those opportunities. And I think, that is going to, I'm sure, shock some people, and some people may write about this, but we do play a disclaimer. The issue for me is, people talk about Sunday morning being the most segregated hour. And I don't think we have a choice in this country. I think it has to remain segregated, because when you take the gospel as my oppressor and preach slavery, it's going to be hard for us to sit next to each other in the same pulpit, or in the same pew for that matter, because we see the gospel message as
And I know you can't speak for that, but I'm talking about in terms from your perspective, from the outside looking in.
I think from the outside looking in, and again, I don't speak for them, but my observation is that there's been a collapse of the gospel.
Correct.
Into
because some folks would say
economy.
racism, and it's not. It's more nuanced than that. So the collapse of the gospel, we agree on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. And so kind of an economic system that benefits some and diminishes the capacities and potentials of others is part of it. I think that I come from northern Ohio in the Rust Belt. Yeah. And I think there are lots of people that feel disenfranchised as jobs that were good paying jobs evaporated. And there's a real sense of hopelessness.
Right.
And that our government and each other kind of let that happen, that division. And I think as we have our refugees and people seeking opportunity coming into Texas and Arizona, they're taking away our jobs, right. Even those are not jobs that we particularly want. So I think that this sense of who the other is gets inflamed. And rather than seeing ourselves as making a bigger table, that there's a space for everybody to be at it and really see the richness of the pluralism, I think that this sense of the opposite of a prosperity gospel has taken hold, so that there's not enough. And we've got this fear of scarcity, and it feeds on fear and anxiety. And I think also it's been flamed since 9/11, where we see the other is coming from beyond our borders and with other religious traditions. So I think that this sense of American exceptionalism, where we're the best and we're the promised, and we don't see that God has gifted human beings from all over the world
Absolutely.
to come here with their gifts and with their dignity to offer a richness for all of us. I think we're thinking that it has to be mine or it can't be anybody else's. And I just think that's a lie. I don't think that's the way the kingdom of God works.
Absolutely, absolutely. As we come to a close, I would love to hear from Attorney Cohen, and then last words to the clerk. Before we get out of here, why is it so important to be involved in early voting in the democratic process, just for folks as we leave?
As we've already said, from the standpoint that these elections, as they say, have consequences. And so we saw that in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump as president. And at the time, we didn't see the fallout of that. Now we have a 63 Supreme Court that's changed a lot of things, probably for the rest of my life and the rest of all of our lives and our kids' lives to some degree. Whatever issue you want to talk about, whatever you believe about abortion, criminal justice rights. I always tell my students now, Miranda has no more teeth. So if an officer doesn't Mirandize you, it doesn't mean anything. It's not that you're going to get off like Miranda did in Arizona. And I don't want to use the term get off. Yeah. It's not that your rights will be protected as they should be under Miranda. So we've seen even the suppression of votes, in particular black votes, in several states. We saw in Louisiana where the Supreme Court chose not to get involved in certain aspects of redistricting and stacking of certain districts within that area. So I think as we see and understand, we have to be adamant and on point that, hey, if you don't get out to vote, it's going to have an impact on your life and your kids' life and your grandchildren's life.
Thank you, Clerk. We got 30 seconds.
30 seconds, I can do that, no problem. Well, if you've heard something resonate with you, we hope that you go early vote. You can do that all the rest of this week until November the 3rd from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 68 vote centers to choose from. On election day, you have 701 vote centers to choose from. You can vote anywhere. Please get the right messaging out there. Vote anywhere on election day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is November 7th. All of your elections information can be obtained from harrisvotes.com, or you can call our hotline at 713-755-6965. We look forward to seeing you at the polls, and I look forward to serving you.
Let me thank all of our guests for being with us on tonight. Man, what an insightful show. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And the fight for your right to vote, the fight to hear or have your voice heard, is a fight that many, many people died for us to have. And I want to encourage you. We don't tell you who to vote for. We just want to encourage you to get out and vote. There are a number of ballots that are on the ballot. There are a number of officials that are running. The mayoral race is arguably the sexy race on the ballot for those of us who live in the city of Houston. But wherever you live, whether it's Harris County, Fort Bend County, Brazoria County, whatever county you live in, Montgomery County, wherever you're listening, and for those of you who are listening around the country and listening around the world, your vote counts, whether it's an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot. Make sure your voice is heard. You've been listening to Real World, Real Talk on your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more. KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. Until next time, God bless is my prayer. Thank you for being with us tonight on Real World, Real Talk.
Thank you for listening to Real World, Real Talk. Make plans to join us next Sunday beginning at 6 p.m. Coming up next, Truth with your host, V. Michael McKay, David Goldstein, and Asia Graves on The Choice 90.9 KTSU, your community station. The views and opinions expressed on Real World, Real Talk do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the management and staff at KTSU FM, nor Texas Southern University Administration and the Board of Regents. Become a member today Make your commitment online at ktsuradio.com.